Hi everyone, today I'm working on another page in my sketchbook, this time inspired by a beautiful photo shoot I found on Pexels. It's this sweet couple in a field of blooming lupins, and it just screamed spring vibes, so I had to paint it. I've been so ready for spring to arrive. The sunshine, the flowers, the colors, it just lifts everything. The winter really got to me. I can't remember the last time I felt that drained and low for such a long stretch. So now that everything's slowly waking up again, I'm doing my best to bring some of that brightness into my sketchbooks, even if the flowers are just painted ones. So in this piece I'm starting with a slow sketch of the guy holding a mirror. I'm using graphite first, nothing fancy, just letting myself explore the shapes without stressing about mistakes. Once I'm happy with the basic structure, I'll go over it with my go-to paints gray pencil and erase the graphite. That's kind of my usual routine. I usually start with an oval for the head and then everything else like the body, the horizon line, builds off that. If you've been following me for a bit, you probably know I love drawing people, nature and animals. So whenever I can find references that include at least two of those things, I'm in. I've learned that I'm most comfortable sketching people in larger sketchbooks, B5 or even A4. Something about the bigger space gives me more freedom to use bolder strokes, even though right now I still feel like my fingers come out more stiff than I'd like. But that's okay. I think as I get more comfortable with the separate parts like hair, facial expressions, or folds in clothing, I'll eventually get to the stage where I can focus on character and gesture more, maybe even start changing up proportions to make things more dynamic. Anyway, where was I? When it comes to landscapes and nature, I actually prefer smaller sketchbooks like A6. It feels less intimidating and you don't have to get into all the tiny details, which is also a challenge I'm working on, trying to capture landscapes in just a few brush strokes instead of overworking them. So lately I've been experimenting with both, bigger and smaller sketchbooks, mixing people with nature, just figuring things out as I go. So I've been breaking down my struggles into smaller, more manageable goals and adding some of them into my 7-day drawing challenges. Hopefully a year from now someone will look back at where I started and think, wow, she was so bad at this a year ago and look at her now. If she can improve like that, so can I. That would honestly be the coolest thing. As you can probably tell, I take my time with the initial sketch. That's why I always include a sped up version too, so you can see the whole process without sitting through all of it. But slowing down at the beginning helps me get into the zone, and the better I plan out the sketch, the easier it is to paint later, especially with a piece like this, where the finger is the main focus, so I want to be intentional with it. Once I had the sketch down, I started thinking about the colors and overall vibe I wanted for the painting. Since it's such a sunny spring kind of scene, I knew I wanted a bright, open sky to set the tone. I usually like to begin with the background because it kind of anchors everything and helps me decide how light or dark the other elements should be. So I mixed up some blue and jumped in. But I ended up making the sky way more intense than I originally planned. I was curious to try this technique where you blot out clouds using a paper towel, and for that to work, the blue needed to be a bit darker so the texture would actually show up. I probably could have tested it on a separate piece of paper first, but of course I didn't. I just went for it. And honestly, it turned out kind of nice. The sky ended up way more vibrant and dramatic than the one on the previous sketch, which I wasn't expecting, but I actually like the contrast it adds. It gives the piece a different kind of energy, like it's later in the day or maybe the light's just stronger. That said, since these two sketches are side by side in my sketchbook and they are based on the same photo series, it did bug me a little. I kept flipping back and forth between them, overthinking whether the skies should match more closely. I know it's probably one of those things that no one else would notice, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It's such a small detail, but when you're deep in the process, little things like that can feel huge for no real reason. Eventually, I just reminded myself that it's okay, there are sketches, not finished pieces, and sometimes trying a new technique is more important than perfect consistency. After the sky, I moved on to the rest of the scene. As I mentioned, I always try to start with the background before diving into the main subject. It just helps me set the tone for the whole piece. Like, once the background's in place, I can better decide how light or dark the figure should be, or how much contrast I'll need to make certain parts stand out. It also takes off some of that pressure when you're staring at a blank page, wondering where to begin. Filling in those larger shapes first makes everything feel less intimidating later when I start working on the smaller details. So I just kept things pretty loose at this stage, trying not to overthink or fuss with anything too much yet, just building a base to work from. I mixed up two different greens, a warmer one and a cooler one, to help break up the field visually. It's such a simple thing, but it really helps. The warmer green is for the section farther in the background, and the cooler green is for the foreground, where the person is standing. I think the cooler tone helps pull that part forward a bit and gives the whole sketch a bit more depth. Then I added a few darker blobs here and there, not super defined, just hinting at future grass patches or spots where the lupins will go later, more like placeholders than actual plants for now. And while I was painting all that, I started thinking, maybe I should do one of my 7-day challenges focused just on plants, like breaking down different shapes of greenery, bushes, wildflowers, tree textures, all that. Because right now, if I'm being honest, I kinda default to the same handful of things every time. I'll paint a few tall strands of grass here and there, then some more over there, and before I know it, it's just grass everywhere. So I'll go back in and try to sneak in a few leaf shapes or abstract flower blobs just to break it up a bit. And maybe that's fine, it might even look okay from a distance, but I can definitely tell when something's just filler. I'd really love to grow my visual library and be more thoughtful about what I'm adding to the scene. Not just painting green stuff, but thinking about what kind of green stuff makes sense there, what shapes or textures would add interest or help tell a story. So yeah, I think turning that into a challenge could be a fun way to explore without overcomplicating it. Just play around with a few new ideas and see what sticks. After finishing the base of the landscape, I started adding a row of dark green trees in the far background. Nothing too precise, more like a soft suggestion of trees, just little silhouettes to help set the scene without stealing any attention. I didn't want them to be too defined, since they are meant to sit way back in the distance. Just something to break up the horizon a little and create some depth. Then I went back to the sky and revisited the clouds. I was already pretty happy with how they turned out. Kinda subtle, a bit soft and hazy, which helped keep the focus where I wanted it, on the person standing in the field. But I couldn't resist testing out a bit of white grey gouache over them to see if I could enhance the contrast and give them a bit more shape. I figured, why not? If I can't experiment in a sketchbook, then where can I? In the end, I wouldn't say I ruined them, but I definitely learned a thing or two. Like, maybe next time I'll go for a cooler, more bluish grey instead of the slightly warmer one I used. That way it would blend in better with the rest of the sky and feel a little more natural. It's one of those trial and error moments. Honestly, white paint is still kind of a mystery to me. I never quite get it to look the way I want. Most of the time I prefer to just leave the paper blank for highlights or light areas, but I'm usually not patient enough to plan that far ahead. So I end up reaching for the white gouache after the fact, and it just never looks quite right. It's always colder or chalkier than I expected. Still, trying things out like this is how I figure out what works for me and what doesn't. Once I wrapped up the sky and background, I finally moved on to the main characters of the sketch, the guy and the girl in the mirror. I always get excited and a bit nervous when I get to this part. People are my favorite thing to draw, but they also take the most focus. I started with the skin, building up the tones gradually. I usually start light, then adjust it if it feels too pale, like it did here. Sometimes it takes a couple of layers to get it just right. I try to be mindful with shadows at this stage, just adding enough to suggest form without going too heavy too fast. Once I'm happy with the skin tones, then I move on to the hair and clothes. That's actually the part where I can relax a bit more and enjoy adding some details. Now I moved on to painting the field. I started by laying in a light wash of green, just a hint of grass using watered down gouache. That usually dries lighter and helps create that soft, slightly blurred background look, which is perfect for layering the lupins over later. At this point, I could spend a bit more time really studying the reference photos and carefully painting different shapes of greenery. But yeah, that's kind of the deal with me and bigger sketchbook pages. I start off slow and mindful, and then somewhere near the finish line, I catch myself trying to rush through. It's like my brain goes, okay, we've been doing this forever. Can we wrap it up now? So instead of building up a variety of plant shapes, I just went with my usual go-to, quick, familiar grass strokes. Later on, I added a few of those finger-like lupin leaves here and there to make it at least feel like we're in a field of lupins. The flowers themselves I kept really simple, just loose, rough suggestions of the shapes. I didn't want them to be overly detailed or photorealistic. The idea was to keep them soft and more in the background, so the focus stays on the person in the scene. I knew I'd come back in with colored pencils at the end anyway, and that always helps tie everything together and add a little pop of detail where it's needed, without stealing the spotlight. So that's the sketch. Hope you enjoy watching the rest of the process, and if it sparks any ideas or makes you want to pick up your sketchbook too, that's already a win in my book. And if you ever end up drawing from this photo, I'd be super excited to see your take on it. Bye!